the long and the short of it, apiologists and bees, if you don't have bees, if bees were to die off worldwide, we would starve to death.
Mm-hmm.
The pollination of plants would dry up, and they're not the only pollinator. People don't realize how important bees are. So governments know that. So governments would protect your father.
His post was declared war essential, and therefore he did not have to serve in the war. And long story short, after the war, the deposed professor came back, and he was shunned by all his colleagues. He was never able to get his post back,
Oh wow.
therefore sued, and Grandpa was included in the group of people he sued. And his family strongly resented this attack against Grandpa. And they also blamed this lawsuit for his early death. He died of a heart attack in his 60s. And they blamed the lawsuit and the plaintiff for Grandpa's death.
You know, recrimination always comes when people realize when they've been duped. And when someone leads them down the rose path, when it's not full of roses after all, it's thorns. And that is what Hitler did. And the people thought things, and you said something in the early conversation, right up to the end in Freiburg where you lived, people had food because they brought food back, and the Germans were always fed because they were supposedly winning the war, but the people in Germany were not suffering. One of the things that the Allied forces, especially under Eisenhower, made it known they were not going to let the Germans get by with another World War I and not feel the war. And we're going to punish the German people in place. So the bombings of the famous bombing
Dresden, Hamburg, you name it.
Dresden. Dresden was the one that was in 44 late in the war. It was to demonstrate how brutal the war was going to be on the German people.
Firestorm.
Firestorm. The phosphorus phosphorus people bombs, they will burn right through anything, literally, and they melt.
No chance even in the bunkers.
Right, they burn through concrete, you name it. People have no idea what a firestorm is with phosphorus bombs. So Dresden was a Paris of Germany, had the same qualities of buildings and so forth, high, beautiful buildings, and basically was not an industrial town. It was not a war-making machine. It was just something you could destroy. And they did that, and it was the guy that pushed that was Churchill to do Dresden, to teach the Germans no more. And the English refer to the Germans as the Huns that never quit. So many words. But your father, at the end of the war, he was in the Navy, right?
He had to volunteer, quote unquote, for the Navy because the reality for 16-year-old males in 1944 was it's the SS. In other words, the worst of the worst who would force recruit you.
What?
They would force recruit you.
Oh.
You know, you would have to volunteer for the SS, otherwise
So he went
you
to the
would
Navy
be
to
looked
avoid
upon with suspicion.
that.
So the only way out, my grandparents and he saw of this was to volunteer, well, for the branch of the armed forces of Germany that was not really active anymore in
The
1944.
Navy was pretty well destroyed.
There were U-boats and all over the place, but
They were all at the bottom of the water.
exactly, yes.
So
he volunteered.
Where was he located?
They took him for basic training into the Alps.
Maybe
Mountains. He learned skiing. And there was, of course, the opportunity for Hitler, which he decided not to do. He decided to commit suicide in his bunker in Berlin instead of retreating to the Fortress Alps. I mean, it could have been an option. But fortunately for Dad, his commanding officer was reasonable enough when he saw the US tanks in the valleys to just tell the kids, throw away your uniforms and go home. And this is what Dad did, which was a life-changing experience for him. Having to walk home for more than 100 miles through cities who had just gone through firestorms, where corpses were essentially on the streets. No trains. You had to hitchhike and walk your way home. And he had to dodge, the American troops and then the French troops, because he lived in
He
an
went
area that
100
was
miles.
occupied by the French.
Yeah, 100 miles he did that.
Exactly.
And how old was he at that time?
He was 16.
16.
And seeing Augsburg and Stuttgart in flames, in ruins, that's what marked him for the rest of his life.
Hard to forget that.
Hard to forget that, yes.
Yeah, it's well, I went to Germany. I think it was in '56 with my uncle and my father, and I remember it was outside of Dortmund, I believe. My uncle wanted us to see a building where everybody died, but the building stood.
Yes.
And that's the phenomenon. He took us to this fourth floor of this building and showed us a table with chairs, and the table was set. The only thing that they removed were the bodies. They were frozen in place. And the concussion of the bomb that hit that building cracked the ground all the way to the top of the 5th story. Everybody inside died from the concussion. We're not obliterated. We're just like the living dead. And he says, I never forgot that, but I wanted you to see that the table setting has not changed. And had we not removed the bodies, it would still be decaying in place.
The amazing thing is that most Germans did not want to believe their lying eyes until they were staring into the barrel of a gun.
Oh, really?
And this is the situation of 1945. There were some last-minute acts of heroism in which regular Germans tried to save their town from obliteration.
Defend it?
By disarming the defenses that the retreating German army was trying to set up with Hitler Youth, the last reserves and so on. And there were cases of civilians who took great risks to undo the tank barriers and send the kids home and do the right thing. But even then, it was rather the exception from the rule.
Well, the fear was overriding.
Fear was overriding, but it was also hope. There were people who, till the last minute, believed that Germany could win this thing.
Oh boy.
Somehow.
And nothing is worse than fear that freezes you in place, as the hope, the false hope of something built on a very, very questionable basis. It's seemingly a strong basis for the beginning of the Autobahn, and with the permanence to it. That demonstrated the future, and then the planes that the practice initially with the planes, the floating planes,
Oh, the Zeppelins.
the Zeppelin, and the other planes that they practiced in, that they would land, would be pulled by another plane, and they would practice landing.
The gliders.
The what?
The gliders.
The gliders. That's what I was trying to think of. That's how they built their Air Force all over it. And we're not supposed to be able to do that. The Versailles Treaty created an example of the Western people creating the prescription for this result. And when you create the prescription, it doesn't always come out the way you think it's going to come out. You're going to punish the people endlessly. You pay a price for doing it. That's what the Germans did to themselves, but largely because of France and Great Britain in the Versailles Treaty, making reparations way too expensive, and consequently the advantage to people who had a different idea. I think we may be coming to the end, but I really want to thank you, Johannes. Johannes Werner has told you a little bit of his life. I think we might want to do this show an extension again in the future. A lot of revelations I've heard, and people in the midst of things, didn't realize what was happening. Sometimes we ignore the things around us, Americans, and the cages along our border. And we were pretty much ignored in this country. So we kind of share the willing ignorance, the comfortable ignorance that the Germans experienced. And that's
it was an uncomfortable experience by 1944.
Well, it became very uncomfortable.
Yes.
That's true. So, Johannes, I want to thank you so much. We'll do it that way. Okay. And thank you for watching. Subscribe to The Edge. watch us and tell us what you think. We want your commentary. This is a piece of history that people probably haven't heard too much about. But there's a parallel to what really I believe is happening in this country. Thank you. You can speak.
Thank you very much, Augie, for having me on the edge.
On the edge. Well, thank you so much. And the duck came to listen too. So thank you again, and we'll do this one more time at least.
Thank you. Got the duck?
Yep.